32 would be 2%.
A lot of this is common. It's rocky out here, guys. Go to your little
you know, there's only so much that your own environmental support, and you know, the Flint Hills have a great they have this reputation of being wonder grass. Well, that's true for a couple months. If you get a big terminal cow in January here and your grass is 3% protein, you're going to have issues. And so I think you're right. I think the value of the breed has been the maternal base. I think you're 100% right. I think it'll remain that. Daniel Mushrush. We're west of Cottonwood Falls in Chase County, Kansas right now, in the middle of Flint Hills pasture. Yeah, I guess I'm a multi-generation rancher here in the Flint Hills. Kind of born and raised here. Grew up, went to K-State, bounced around a couple other places for a while, and ultimately once I started having a family, I kind of started longing for this place and realized how good of a place this is to raise a family. And so I came back to the family operation around 10 years ago, I guess now. And now I work on the ranch with my brother and his wife, and then my mother and father and my family. I think it's important for a multitude of reasons, and one of the things I kind of think in terms of systems-based approaches, and rangeland management is one of the few things I think that really can accomplish a multitude of goals at the same time. One, I think first and foremost, the preservation of the Flint Hills is very important to me, and so we've got to manage this right to put it in a place where the Flint Hills biome can succeed. You know, as a whole. That's kind of the macro of it. Micro, I think where this really can benefit is there's a multitude of benefits from a financial standpoint for a rancher who adopts some of these grazing practices. And so it's really a win-win where, you know, the environmentalist types can get what they want, the small community can be profitable. There's really no downsides to learning how to do proper grazing management. And so I think it's really vital, really, to the future of the Flint Hills.
Based on dry weight, and right now we're clipping it green, so there's quite a bit of moisture in these plants right now. They're still fairly vegetative. You know, the best way to know is to take a sample and dry it out. You can do that by just letting it air dry. Usually takes about a week. I'll just leave it in the bag and fluff it up every couple days, and usually within about a week the weight has been staying constant enough to where it's pretty dry, and that gives you a pretty accurate idea of how much moisture is in these plants. Right now, just kind of estimating about 40%, probably with as vegetative as everything is right now. You know, time of day you do this could affect that too. If we were out doing this first thing in the morning with all that fog and heavy dew on the grass, I mean, we may have been as low as 15 or 20% dry matter.
Great things that happen in the prairie, and one of the great things that happens here is diversity. So you've got a wide range of plants. You've got taproot systems, you've got fiber root systems, you've got root systems that may go down as in some situations maybe 10 to 15 feet. Others, they're very shallow, but it's this diverse ecosystem, and that's why it's healthy. Not that there isn't some erosion here, but it's apples and oranges compared to something that's not been tilled.
Come at the leaf blade. Yeah. So we got, I think I hit bare ground, switchgrass was the closest forward now.
That's your Sharpie?
Yeah, that's my Sharpie.
If you count this dead stalk, it might be this.
Yeah, hard to tell whether that was this year's growth. It might have been, but it's not rooted anymore, so I don't use that.
So then your closest forward.
So right here.
It's gonna be the ragweed.
Oh yeah, there's a ragweed right there. Okay. So again, we take a 11, 16.
You know, there's a constant invasive species coming in, you know, always, you know, threats of trees coming in, eastern red cedars coming in, Sericea lespedeza coming in. So those can affect you know, how the Flint Hills, how the grass itself responds to things. Proper management can keep some of those at bay. You know, the other thing I'd argue, and this is maybe a little bit of a countercultural view, I guess, but one of the biggest threats to the Flint Hills is when they're no longer profitable. You know, when a deer hunter can buy a piece of ground and let it go to brush because that's, you know, when there's more value in hunting than grazing, for example, that really is damaging to our biome. And so to keep these as a viable ranching community, I guess, really goes hand in hand with the ultimate preservation.
We don't want them to knock it all, like force them to eat the stuff they shouldn't because they're lactating. Good point. Okay, yeah, so there's some of that production side of the animal. When should we factor that in as far as production? You bet, you bet. So we could sure take it down to 4 or 5, and if that was half, because some of this could take a little shorter, but what might that do on that side of the equation? And it's all about that balancing act with all of these. So really not too far off though. Well, that's 6 to 8. That's a good range to kind of play in right there. Okay.
The thing that we did talk a little bit about in one of the groups was knowing where you're at in the time of the year and what you would expect, and maybe what your goal is next spring, how much you want to leave. So that kind of factored into one of the discussions that we got into.
So the other thing is we got a really good opportunity here to have a discussion. So whether, I think I said out west was maybe like, you know, the landowner versus tenant or something else, but as a group we've got to decide on a spot, right, for a day. And so we're going to go through some of these other factors. Okay, forage production side. Daniel, are you okay with that range, 6 to 8? Would that give you enough cover?
Chris lives here.
Yeah,
Because we got to remember back to, okay, because there's future goals and stuff. What you mentioned about calving, stuff
we're
like
not
that.
going to winter anything in this piece.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and take it down to 6 to 8.
Okay. Okay. But it matters on what that intent. So again, that's that producer decision and those goals. So we weren't going to let them take it past what Chris said. So if you came up with more than that, we're doing no deal. No bonus.
You have wintered here though, because there's a lot of ragweed and
there's been horses
woolly.
kept in this pasture in years past, and you're seeing some of the effects of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was Grandpa's horse pasture. In fact, it's called the horse pasture.
Yep.
We have one of those.
We have one of those.
But that's a good point though. Like I said, history of management, things like that. It's interesting to step back and think about some of those impacts that can drive plant communities. You know, and so what nudged it this way? What can we do to nudge it back the other way? So
it's been good. In the past, it's been good, and to be honest with you, it's getting even better. You know, in the past, I think we took advantage of some programs for conservation. They were a little bit one size fits all, and I really do feel in the last couple years that that NRCS is getting a lot more adaptive. So maybe the Smoky Hills of Kansas aren't treated the same as the Flint Hills of Kansas, which aren't treated the same as the Gyp Hills of Kansas, which aren't the same as just tillable ground. And so we're seeing some things come down the pipeline that are, you know, maybe watershed specific or biome specific that are really adaptive, and I really appreciate as a landowner and an operator. Yeah, I think this is, you know, continuing education in something as difficult as ranching is always beneficial. Nobody knows enough, and nobody can know too much, and so this will let you just be adaptive, you know, and that's what this does is give you that adaptability so you can respond to some conditions rather than be held hostage with them. And like I said, it really is more that the business component of it is incredibly important to me as a young man trying to raise a family and doing it with this set of rules of economics. But there is that preservation of the biome in play here, and you cannot know too much. You know, I look at it in terms of, you know, maybe a professional soldier, for example. They're always training, they're always preparing for that next battle. You know, complacency is a real problem in you know, warfare, for example, and really it's no different in ranching. We just got to be continuing to get better and get better, and those that won't will ultimately go broke in this sort of market environment, and hopefully they don't take their land with them, but it's a real threat. There's a multitude of challenges almost daily in this business. You know, it feels like that that sometimes it's almost harder to think long term because you're so busy putting out fires. Things jump up and get us, whether it's a market or weather or drought situation. And one of the ones I'm probably most proudest of in the last 10 years that we've been here, through NRCS, we were able to convert a bunch of tillable acres and a highly erodible river bottom into perennial forage. That does a world of good we're in the John Redmond watershed. We've had a couple major rainfall events. The last one was several weeks ago, was 8 inches in 3 hours. We are frankly taking a lot of sediment out of the Cottonwood River. So that's a win for NRCS. We're stopping a lot of erosion. For me, the challenges it helps me is with our fall herd. We're putting our cattle back on grass through the winter. We're keeping them there longer. Animal health is better, performance is better. Antibiotic use has gone to almost zero. And so some really expensive challenges for us personally and you know, for the folks at John Redmond, even with silt. We were able to kind of come together, and we've been able to use that systems approach and I think do a lot of good things. And this is just, I look at that project as just a start. I think we can do a lot more. I'm optimistic. If you're not optimistic and young in agriculture, you're going to be banging your head against the wall for a very short period of time, and then you're going to wash out. You know, I wouldn't have brought my family back here to raise them up if I wasn't optimistic on the future. I think there's a lot of things around the corner, especially with technology, that are going to let us do just incredible things, allow us to do more with less, whether it's money or manpower or whatever it may be. And at the same time, we're going to be able to do a better job monitoring, you know, prairie health, soil health, and I think we'll look back on these times even in 10 or 15 years and think we were just absolutely antiquated. So I'm excited for the years that are coming. Yeah, like I said, you can never have too much thinking. You can never have too much sharing of ideas. There's never too much learning in this. And so whenever there's a chance like this to, like today, you know, either host the group or even be part of a group, I see no downside. And so I think it's great that NRCS, you know, take some time to do some outreach like this, as opposed to, you know, fixing that terrace or redoing that waterway. Yes, those are important things, but you know, it kind of goes back to that whole idea. You know, if you give a guy a fish, you know, he'll eat for a day, but if you teach him to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And I think these outreach classes like this are just incredibly important for areas like the Flint Hills.
Now, what I mean by the variation, birds like short stuff and tall stuff right next to each other.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.